record. Okay, thanks for coming on. This is my free monthly group coaching call. It usually happens the first Tuesday of the month, 10 to 11 Pacific time. But check my newsletter to make sure that I haven't changed the time or canceled it, something like that. So, oh, and I also posted on my Facebook page, just like the day of or the day before, if you want to check and see if it's happening. So, want to get into this subject. It's kind of a fun subject, and for a lot of us, it'll be a review of things like you knew, but you've forgotten. So the topic is, I'm talking to somebody and they get triggered and I go, why did they just get triggered? I didn't do anything. How many of you have ever kind of felt that? Like, hey, what did I do? Okay, so I titled it, I'm Innocent, because so many of us, when somebody's triggered with us, that automatically triggers us into the, gee, what did I do wrong? And deeper than that, it's that core fear of being bad or wrong, which is hard to identify. It's hard to recognize that in yourself, but I invite you to look for it. If you wonder, gee, I didn't do anything wrong, that's your portal. So the way I'm going to run this, I'm going to say a few things, then I'm going to ask you guys for examples of situations where you have inadvertently triggered somebody, or a conversation just didn't go well, and we'll dialogue about that. So this will be kind of a short list of the kind of things that trigger people, and maybe even you, but kind of like you think they shouldn't, because we're rational people. Some of us think that, some of us don't. Some of us go, I don't value being rational. I just like to go with whatever comes up with me and fight about it, even if it doesn't make any sense, just kind of express. Some of us have a real bias about expressing, and others of us have a little more bias about, hey, is this rational? How many, just show of hands, how many people here kind of like that word rational and would apply that to yourself most of the time? Show of hands. Okay. I see this motion here. I don't know, Charles, I have a different imagining about you, but we don't know each other that well. Maybe I'll learn more today.
Right.
Okay, so here's one that well, let me put the screen share up, and then you can see all of them, and I won't take too much time with this so that I can hear from you guys. So I have a screen share. Situations that trigger people. No, that's not it. That's not it. Okay, stop share. Try again here, folks. Screen share. There it is. That's not it either. So, it's hard sometimes to find the right thing on your desktop. I think I think that look, I'll just have to go with this version. Okay, this version here is, I've got number one, saying no. You say no to somebody, like, would you like me to fix you breakfast? It can be something as simple as that. The other person says, and you go, no. That can trigger somebody. I think you understand that. Anybody got any situations where that has happened that you want to like raise right now? If not, I'm gonna give you a little tip for that type of situation. Speak out because I can't see all the.
I have a question because
Yeah,
I'm
Kathy.
seeing something that says general tips for when the other is triggered. Is that the one that we're reviewing?
Yeah, this is situations where you you do something and it triggers the other person. So you say no to another person. You say, no, I don't want you to fix me breakfast. And they get hurt by that. No, maybe that's never happened to you, but it does happen. It does happen to me sometimes in my primary relationship with my partner. Just a no, if I haven't done something to get the person prepared for that. If you know that your partner gets triggered, like if I just refuse something that he wants to offer me, that can be triggering for him. So if you know that your partner or some significant person in your life has difficulty hearing no, I mean, can you feel how that might be for some people? Just hearing no feels like a rejection, or I'm not enough, I'm not wanted. That's the kind of core fear. It helps. So there's a tip right along with the dilemma here. There's a tip, which is you can slow it down and get them prepared. Like, I hear that you want to fix me breakfast, and that's so sweet, but I'm not hungry right now. Just something that's a little slower and with a little more connection than just, if you're just being rational and you're just on an information content level, you'll just say no or no thanks. And for some people, we could say that's their problem and you can clean it up later, and you don't have to babysit them. But if you know that it's your partner's trigger, or if you already know, why not do something to soften it for them a little bit? See, some of the stuff I've written after saying no is not relevant to this, because I cleaned it up with my other handout, but my other handout's just not on the screen. Another thing that triggers people is sometimes you ask them a question where they're going to have to say no, like, do you want to go to the gym with me? I've got that as an example here. Just a simple thing. Do you want to go to the gym with me? But they don't like having to say no. So they make you wrong for asking the question. Like, why are you always bugging me to go to the gym? Something like that, So a simple interaction, what you thought would be a simple interaction, all of a sudden it's got all this garbage mixed up with it. So that's what we mean by a trigger reaction. People throwing a lot of excess meaning into you want to go to the gym with me. When I ask that question, there's no extra meaning. It's not like you're fat, you should work. It's not, I don't mean that. I'm going, you want to go. I'm innocent. But the other person hears something more, like you're not enough, something like that. Okay, another thing for another situation. So I'll just go through these 6 in a short amount of time, and then I want to hear from you guys. Sometimes we want to give the person some negative feedback, possibly because they asked. Like in my blog last month, I talked about a woman whose boss asked her for feedback about a particular situation that they were both in. But once she gave him the feedback, he got very defensive, very angry, started justifying himself. So then there's a trigger in the space whenever there's defensive or repeating yourself, explaining, there's a trigger. So we'll talk about what to do in these situations in a minute. But one of the things that helps to prevent that is don't assume, okay, in this case that I wrote about in the blog, the boss asked her for feedback, but a lot of times you'll just be friendly and you want to give somebody feedback. I think that's what humans do, or that's what friends do for each other, or especially in a couple. I mean, gee, that's what we're here for, to kind of help each other see ourselves more clearly. So I'm here to help you see yourself more clearly. Now, that can be triggering, or that can be seen as truly helpful. So I have the one assumption that my feedback is going to be helpful. If they don't, and this is a very common situation that people don't know how to handle. I think it's important, if there's any doubt about whether you have the kind of relationship where we give each other honest feedback, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes. Couples, for example, need to establish that agreement explicitly, I think, because so often, even when they do have it as an explicit agreement, like, yes, we give each other critical feedback, even when they do, things can go awry. But it's important for all of you on this call to be able to have that conversation when it's appropriate, which is before you launch into the feedback. Do we have the kind of friendship where we give each other feedback, even the kind of thing that might be seen as critical? Do we want that from each other? And then you might discuss it a little bit, and then you go, okay, yeah, we do. Okay, then I have something for you. Are you available to hear it? So when people are sensitive to not being good enough, being criticized, that sort of thing, it's good to use some of these tools. It prevents some problems. Okay, the next one, number 3, is suggestions for improvement. And that's kind of like the feedback one. Same ground rules, and the same triggers come up around that. If you suggest an improvement, a lot of times people see that as criticism. So I'm just a person who sees a better, let's say I'm the mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law thing is like a super big territory where this comes up. And I hear it from my mother-in-law friends that their daughter-in-laws just, whoa, they don't like the mother-in-law. They don't like my girlfriends, because my girlfriends have been through a lot. They've had children, they've, been successful at having a household and a career and all that. And so they make a little suggestion to their daughter-in-law, and it is not wanted. So sometimes, these younger women are like super triggerable, but maybe sometimes if you are a person who notices what needs improvement, and you know that about yourself, you can actually establish that. I'm the kind of person who so please don't take it personally. I'm like this with everybody. That type of thing can really help. And a boss, I used to do a lot of corporate consulting, particularly with what the organization would call controlling bosses. And if the boss can say to his or her team, this is just the way I am. I'm a micromanager. You're going to be annoyed probably by the amount of questions I ask you, but I'm like this with everybody. Please don't take it personally. And if it bothers you, let's talk about it. So just these are ways to soften the other person's reaction. Disagreement or difference of opinion is another big thing where you trigger, you have this idea about the vaccine. Let's say we did a few of these Tuesday morning calls about pro and con in terms of the vaccine. And so people get stuck in, okay, I'm over here with the pro and I'm over here with the anti. what if, and this only goes for certain types of situations, but what if in a conflict situation like this, you said, let's look together. And this is particularly if there's a decision to be made, like a joint decision, like whether to buy a new refrigerator. You're a couple and whether, we should do this big purchase. Let's list all the pros together and let's list all the cons together. Okay, new refrigerator, pro, it'll use less energy, all that stuff that's in the old refrigerator, we'll get rid of it. Cons would be, I have to go through all that old stuff in the refrigerator and get rid of it. So you just listen, but it makes things more friendly because you have a chance to get on the same side with each other. So I really like that one when there's a joint decision to be made. Sometimes just asking a question. What are your plans for the day? Is the example I have on here. What are your plans for the day? People get reactive around that kind of a question because they don't have a good answer. I have no plans. So why can't you say you have no plans? Well, because I've got a trigger about not being enough.
Yeah.
And when you do the trigger work that's outlined in my book, From Triggered to Tranquil, and also the book 5-Minute Relationship Repair, when you really learn this trigger work, you can see if you are the kind of person, let's say, who has a not good enough fear or rejection fear or fear of being criticized. It's good to be able to name what the fear is. The final
Sorry to interrupt. Karen, could you mute yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I thought I was muted.
I know.
Oh, thank
I
you
wanted
so
you to know.
much. I'm
Thanks.
so sorry.
Sorry,
I'm listening
Susan, to
intently. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Darcy, and thanks, Karen.
Hi, Darcy. Okay.
So the final one that I wrote here, and I'm not going to get to the tips until the very end because I want to talk to you guys now. Wanting to clear the air with somebody without any prior agreement that what clearing the air means. And once again, it's sort of like the do we give each other critical feedback without any agreement that this is what we're doing right now, without a frame. So I heard somebody the other day, it was a client of mine, who had just taken the forum, and I thought they were pretty clear in the forum. The forum is, the newer version of EST. I thought they were pretty clear in there about how to do a clearing, but it sounded like no, they didn't, like, they didn't teach people to set a context, like, now we're going to clear the air and here's what that means. And if I can express to you some of the things that have been bothering me, I'll be able to get past that and maybe we'll be able to feel more connected. Would you be willing to do that with me? And then after I've done what I have to do to reveal, to clear the air, I want to hear your response. So, I mean, that's what a clearing session looks like. You need prior agreement. You need to set a context on the intent of the clearing. It's not just to dump on the person, because so many people go home and clear with their parents and they'll just dump on the parent, and the parent goes, wait, what did I do? How did this happen? So I just have my own guidelines for what works and what doesn't work in terms of clearing with the parent or clearing with a spouse or an ex or anything. So, and I know Dex had a situation which I didn't have on my list, which is you're trying to do a repair after a trigger, and you kind of both think that you know what the repair steps are, and you think you're doing it, pretty close to by the book, but it goes awry. And tell us, are you willing to jump in here, Dex? If you could tell us,
Yeah.
where does it go awry in your world?
So each of us have different views of what happened. So she thinks that I'm telling her what to do, and I believe I made a clear request. It wasn't a demand, it was a request. And so in the repair, the way I understand it, I have to empathize with her and say, well, yeah, I get that hearing a demand is really triggering. And I didn't make a demand, so it's hard for me to acknowledge the truth of what she heard, because my trigger is being blamed. So I feel like I'm admitting my wrong when I agree with her understanding.
So let me expand that a little bit. One of the sentences that might be said in a good repair would be, and this is sort of not the final statement in a repair, but it would be one of the early statements that people might use would be, when this happened, I felt. That can be the very beginning of the repair. Like, when you demanded this of me would be she might not use that word, but she's got that flavor to it. When you demanded this of me, I got triggered. It was probably, and here's the sentence, it was probably my old fear of being bad or wrong that no, my old fear of being controlled, because that's probably what that would be. Yeah, it's probably my old fear of being controlled coming up. And in a really good, adequate trigger repair, the person would only be talking about themselves, except in that first thing, when you made that demand. So that's where there's a discrepancy, because right after that, a good repair would be, I reacted by getting angry and walking out. That was a trigger reaction. If I had it to do over, I would pause and tell you and then hopefully be able to at least say I was triggered. And now I need some reassurance that I'm good enough, or because when you have a fear of being controlled, sometimes it's based on some kind of a fear of being bad or wrong, being not good enough, like, why does this person have to tell me how to be? I'm perfectly good at doing it myself. That's the defensive reaction when somebody thinks you're making a demand and it's just been a request. So this is what an ideal repair would be admitting that I have this fear of being controlled. It was probably my fear of being controlled, and it taps into this fear that I'm not good enough. And I need your help to feel that I am good enough. So that's like the final statement in a repair. It's all about me, really. If I'm going to try to redo the conversation and say, well, you did this and I did that, and the reason I did that was this, that's not a repair. That's just rehashing in different words, maybe calmer tones of voice. At least they start out calmer. And so most people don't do repair according to those fairly disciplined steps that I teach. But let's go to she says, when you made that demand, I felt hurt or I felt angry. And so it's hard for you, Dex, to validate that you just made a demand because you didn't make a demand, no, in your world. So in a sense, you're getting triggered by hearing the word demand, and you admitted it yourself. What is it you think your trigger fear is? The core fear underneath this trigger?
Being blamed, being wrong, being
Blamed. Yeah, blamed and wrong.
criticized.
So what's going to happen, and this is the whole point, you know, the whole I'm innocent or I didn't say that, we get triggered too when we're either quoted or misunderstood, misheard, when there is a blaming or anger element to it. Now it's all of a sudden, now I'm triggered. So ideally, you might have to say, and this, it's hard to say it right in the middle of a repair because you're trying so hard to get closure, but you might have to say, now I'm triggered. When I heard the word demand, it triggered my fear of being blamed, which is kind of connected to my fear of being seen as bad or wrong. So now I need some reassurance that when you use the word demand, you're not seeing me as bad or wrong for that. You're just revealing that that's how you take it. So I mean, that's of course the ideal way where you're still present even though you're triggered, and you're friendly. Even, you know, if you're triggered, you're not going to be able to be very friendly. See, I'm modeling friendliness there, but when you've been through it enough, you can be friendly. You can kind of take some of your own trigger reactions a lot more lightly. You just have to go through it a lot of times consciously, reworking it, repairing it, knowing the language that truly helps you accept, yeah, I do have this fear of being blamed. And Dex, you seem to have that. You're pretty fluent naming your own core fears there. Fear of being blamed, fear of being seen as bad or wrong. So you might actually be able to say, okay, I need to pause right in the middle of a repair. I need to pause. It's hard for me to hear the word demand. So you're witnessing the whole thing. See, the pause brings in the witness. You know, witness means you can kind of play back the video of what's been happening. I heard you say the word demand. I noticed I got triggered from that. It's hard for me. I have the fear. It would help me if you would reassure me that you don't see me as demanding. I'm not sure you can honestly reassure me that way, but that's the kind of help I need right now to get calm again and feel connected to you.
Yeah.
So we can't change the other person. We can't get them to stop saying the word demand. We can ask, but if you're going to ask, you're going to have to do that with a lot of friendliness and humor, because you already know that you've had this fight many times. I wasn't demanding, I was requesting. You know, that's in the space, those prior arguments. So I want to say, practice doing this stuff makes you more able to bring in connection and friendliness, even when talking about her trigger and yours. Now, tell me what you're left with, Dex, hearing all this.
Two things. One is what really helps me is to hold that little boy who is afraid of being blamed or criticized. Like, really, that softens me when I can be with him. And the other thing is how when I don't get to that soft place, doesn't seem to be any resolve. Like I have to find that place in order to really be a force for good. Otherwise, her trigger triggers me, my trigger triggers her, and it just goes. And there's no resolve at all.
So glad that you talked about the pausing to really feel connected to that part of you that's afraid of feeling being seen as bad or wrong. That's what Dexter's talking about. The formal trigger repair process and the trigger work involves ideally pausing as soon as you're aware that there's a trigger in the space and you guys are going around and around in a vicious cycle. It was a request. No, it was a demand. It was a request. No, it was a demand. Once you get into that, you have to pause. And what Dexter's referring to, and a lot of you have done these practices, feeling first just whatever that reactive feeling is. See if you can find it in your body. Sometimes it's around your heart. Sometimes it's your belly, your solar plexus. Sometimes it's in your jaw, your throat. You'll feel a sensation, or you'll feel some kind of contraction. And there'll be some flavor of emotion and emotional content to it. If you just feel it and follow it, and if you sit with it long enough, you may get an impression or a memory or just some vague sense that there've been a lot of times in my life that I may or may not remember where I was accused of things or misunderstood or blamed or something like that. And it had me, and he refers to the little boy because almost all of us had something that imprinted us in childhood to be more vigilant about this particular issue as adults, like to be more vigilant about, am I being criticized? Am I being blamed, put down, controlled, told that I'm not good enough in some way? Not necessarily in those words. So knowing that child space and owning that that's still operating in you and holding that with compassion and tenderness and empathy. It's like self-compassion. Dex is saying, and I love that you said this is what allows for you to have a good repair, is you soften around the emotional pain and the contraction around, the thing that she said to me. She accused me of something. She had that tone. You learn to soften around that. And like most of us naturally resist something that's emotionally painful. Well, now we welcome this emotionally painful thing because it puts us more in touch with deeper layers of our own self that have been repressed and denied. So now I'm re-owning this inner child part that never got heard about. Hey, stop blaming me. I need love. I need support right now. And so we befriend that hurting part, and then we're not so afraid of emotional pain anymore. We're like beyond that more primitive, protect yourself from pain, no matter what you have to do. That primitive response is in all of us. It's a survival mechanism built in to the brain, not the cerebral cortex, but the middle brain and the reptilian brain is like wired up to react. So we have to develop these higher capacities, and that's the self-compassion capacity, the witnessing capacity, the being with discomfort capacity. We can intend to develop those, and we can develop them, and then we can become more friendly with whatever life throws at us. That's the whole idea of getting real, is whatever life throws at me, like Don and I were talking about in the beginning with our health challenges. We go, oh, now this, what does this moment require of me? So that's the aim of this work. But the trigger work is kind of like the essential part of it. It's the hard stuff, but you have to do it to get to the so you don't get there without usually handling some early traumas or triggers. Comments about that or situations? I want to open it back up to you now. Situations, sort of like what Dex talked about, but your own situation.
I have with my mom many times. And we've developed a method based on your book. So every time that I get triggered, I tell Mom, give me 1 second. I'm going to document my trigger.
Oh, wow, that's good.
And I literally do that. I go into my computer, my notes, document the trigger, and then I tell her back what I found out. So she doesn't feel blame. She knows it's my trigger, that I'm not accusing her of anything. And for me, and I also believe for her, we establish connection through sharing the moment together. And then we move on because I understand it is my trigger. And I also tell her, instead of telling me like this, could you please ask me this way?
Uh-huh.
And I go like this. And she laughs and she asks me, yeah, like that. Like
You
the way,
bring friendliness to it, and that makes all the difference in how
yeah.
the request is received.
Yes. Or sometimes, and this I learned from a friend, I tell her, oh, Mom, you mean this, right? So, for example, when she says, you shouldn't be doing that,
Mm-hmm.
I go and I tell her, oh, Mom, you mean you would like me to act in a different way, right? You would like me to do this instead, right? Is that what you mean? Well, yeah. Yeah, I still don't want to. I still want to keep my way of doing it. And it's really working amazing.
That's so good. That's so good. So one of the things that Kathy just shared was, so she rephrases Mom's should statement to oh, that means you'd like me to. Is that right, Mom? That's what I call throwing somebody a lifeline. And again, that's part of friendliness. That's part of expanded capacity. You're having a creative response to the moment, which is what my blog was about this month, I sent out yesterday or something. A creative response to this moment, instead of needing Mother to say it the right way, you help her out. You throw her a lifeline. Great example. And I love you've taken the pause and you've just made it for yourself, because maybe Mom doesn't read these kind of books, but you can still bring it to Mom in this way. Lovely. Anything else coming up for people? Anything at all?
I have one.
Yeah.
Me and my significant other, when we're having conversations, if I start asking clarifying questions, that seems to be a trigger for him. And then how I feel is left confused because I'm trying to understand him, I feel like, but the questioning isn't received as understanding. It's received from what I understand, is interrogation. So then we kind of just both stop because we're not able to get past this feeling of interrogation and then me feeling left confused.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one because you really aren't following everything the other person says, because they've got layers of meaning and you're trying to get to the more hidden layers of meaning sometimes, or just to get a little more information. And the other person, they honestly, a lot of times they haven't gone that far down in themselves to have an answer, so they feel inadequate. So that's pushed that button, I'm not good enough. I don't have a good answer to this, so I'm just going to make her wrong. So this, like you said, Breck, you can't get any further. You really do have to pause in these situations and each go, what was that? So then, of course, you're somewhat triggered too, because you're frustrated. You can't get connection. You're looking for continuing connection, possibly, leading toward resolution. You're not getting that. You're getting a brick wall. You're frustrated. So let's do a little work. So what is it for you? Because if you can do your inner inquiry when you're triggered, if you can model that, it makes it safe for the other person. Like Kathy's example that we just heard was like, I'm going to document what my triggers are about now. So all of a sudden, I'm just talking about my own triggers. I'm not saying, you got triggered. Now, now we can't talk anymore because you're so upset about nothing, or whatever's in your mind. You don't make it at all about the other person. It's okay for us in doing an analysis to guess what's the probable trigger of the other person, like feeling not good enough would be, possibly feeling controlled too. There's probably like 12 basic fears that you can pick from, and they're all listed in my books. I call them the favorite fears. And it's useful to have labels for what your partner's triggers might be, because it can help you offer something that's useful once you're no longer triggered. But that's the extent of it, better now. So Breck, will you just talk to me? We'll dialogue a little bit. When you're there and he's refusing now to answer your questions or taking offense, what do you feel?
My underneath fear is that I won't understand what to do right next time.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm kind of like, well, now I don't know how to act or react or how to do something in a positive way that's not triggering him. So I feel like I'm going to fail every time because I don't understand what he's wanting or needing.
Yes. So in a sense, you might not have been here when we were talking about helplessness. I think that was before the recording, but it's sort of like, I don't know what to do, or I won't know what to do. It's that kind of feeling. No, I want to be able to prevent this in the future. So feeling into that feeling and having that need, frustrated, like I can't get my answers. So I'm calling that kind of like helplessness. Do you have any associations to that place in you from childhood? I'll just go quickly through this. A lot of times, I leave people plenty of time to find. Yeah. But see, do you find anything if you just look like that?
Mm-hmm.
What do you find?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family that was, my parents probably weren't consistent. So my need for consistency and my need for knowing how somebody is going to respond or react probably comes from a very deep childhood where I didn't have anybody to go to, where I was like, okay, I know I'm just going to get calm love, or I know I'm just going to get support. Like it's that instability feeling.
Beautiful. So let's take a moment, and those of us who are listening to Breck right now, I bet you we can feel some empathy for that child. So you and I, Breck, let's just take a moment and honor how hard that was for that child at various ages. Sometimes it helps to kind of picture yourself at a certain age, but that went on for quite a while, I guess, right?
Yes.
So just as you feel, and let yourself soften around that empathy that you have for that younger version of you, and just be with that a bit. And like, it's like, as we notice these old origins of this kind of trigger, this kind of vigilance, this kind of fear, as we notice it, we are kind of softening. We're also developing a bit of a witness, which is always good for making whatever you're learning about yourself be more, have a stronger impression. You learn things better when you have your witness activated. So we're witnessing myself as 8 years old, and there's all this chaos going on around me in this case. And yesterday it was the other way. So there's like no consistency. What am I supposed to do here? And you're just feeling into that, getting to know and valuing getting to know what was going on in that little girl's world. And when you start to value knowing yourself, you need less of having to control the things outside of yourself, because everything that you can't control outside of yourself that you'd like to be able to control, that helps you see yourself and accept yourself and come to terms with what happened to you back then. I can't change the past, but this is called coming to terms with it. Coming to terms with the kind of like the hand you were dealt. And that's a mark of growing up. And very often there's grief. Almost everybody I work with on stuff like this, I mean, they have insights and joy around their insights, but there's also an aspect that I call grief, and it's grief for the loss of my potential there, who I could have been if I'd had a more consistent, safe environment when I was 8 years old. It's not like crying over spilt milk. It's just, this happened. I'm sad. I'm going to carry some grief about that, and I'm going to honor that.
Yeah, it made my chest a little tightened. Whenever I said that, I got, teary-eyed. It's just even thinking back to it about, like, if somebody could have just given me some information so that I would have just not been walking around just wondering what was going to happen all the time.
That's right. That's right. Because emotional safety in childhood enables the child to thrive and just be spontaneous and creative and like almost like find new resources within yourself. Whereas lack of safety has you being protective and not taking too many risks and kind of looking ahead or looking out for danger. And that takes up an awful lot of your life energy as a child. And so many children had way too much of their life energy bound up in scanning for some form of emotional danger or even physical danger. And if that's your story, this this is really important, you know, to really love yourself through it.
Mm.
And it just happened to so many people. And I think that for the most part, my childhood had a lot of emotional safety. And I think one of the reasons I went into becoming a psychotherapist was to understand the other side of life that was more true of more of my peers. It's almost like my way of learning to belong to the human race, because growing up in a safe environment wasn't most people's stories. And I see, though, what a gift that was for me, because I'm not the kind of person that spends much time looking out for danger or, you know, what's going to happen if I say this. And yet I see that all around me. And in some ways I feel grateful, but then that doesn't prepare me. The fact that I didn't have to look out for danger very much, there's one dark side to that, I'll just tell you. And that is like, I don't know when there's danger. Sometimes somebody says something like critical, or maybe what most people would be insulted by, and I just think it's helpful. I just think they're coming from a friendly place, and they're not. You know? And I have to have my girlfriends point it out to me, that person was putting you down. And I go, geez, I didn't notice. I didn't see it that way. It seems like possible slight deficit in my ability to navigate the world, but that's about it. No, it's not that big of a deficit. Okay, any other comments before I summarize? Because I've got some tips for us. Anybody got something else? So I'm gonna go with the tips now, see if I can find that on my screen share here.
Susan?
Yeah, sure.
you Actually shared the screen share before.
Oh, right. That same one had the tips.
It
Yeah,
shows right up
because it
forefront.
seems to not have shown up. You know, I made these two nice handouts and neither of them are on there for some reason. So there's the tips. This first tip is from the book Saying What's Real. And it's a wonderful thing to just have in your hip pocket. It's the response. Hey, let's say you're having a boring conversation, or let's say you're moving towards sexual intercourse on your first date, but you're not sure if that's what you really want. Okay, and that's an example I give in the book. This couple, it's their first date. Well, I thought you wanted it. Well, I thought you wanted it because I don't really want to be doing this right now. Somebody has to say, can we pause in what we're doing or what we're talking about to check in about how we're both feeling? And that can prevent triggering sometimes, but it can also prevent just staying in a boring conversation, doing something like having sex when you don't really want to, but you think that's what somebody else wants. So I like that one. By the way, the book Saying What's Real contains 7 statements that bring your conversation into the present moment. Now, revising is my number 2 tip. And that's the do-over. If I had it to do over, because sometimes you start to feel that there's tension and you might say, hey, could we take a breath, take a pause and just start over? You may not always need a pause where you look inward at what's triggering you if the triggering hasn't gone on very long. If it's just like on the beginning, then you can say, could we start this conversation over? Or I'd like to revise how I started this. If I had it to do over, I would say, da, 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 da. I would ask you, if you're ready to talk about our plans for the day, rather than just popping off and saying, what are your plans? So that's one of those situations that trigger somebody. What are your plans? Well, geez, am I supposed to have plans? So you revise it. You say, I would have said, hey, I'd like to talk about our plans for the day. Are you ready to do that? Of course, even that, if they have to say no, they could make you wrong for asking that question. But you've got more options here. We're not trying to avoid the other person getting triggered. I mean, we're trying to do it to the extent that we can, out of kindness and out of learning what we've known, what we're beginning to know triggers the other person. So, we do it to a certain extent because we're in a we system, and it's in my interest to help you not be triggered so much. Wait, I see there's something in the chat and I don't have my chat open, so I'm going to see what that is. Oh, it's just a gotta go. Okay, bye. So then a couple more tips. This one comes from the book Saying What's Real. Just being able to name your feeling in a moment, like, oh, hearing that, hearing you say, well, geez, why do I always have to have plans? Hearing that, my self-talk is, maybe that was too abrupt for him. Maybe he doesn't have plans. So you just sometimes, share a little bit about yourself. The fourth one, sharing mixed emotions. This might have to do with like clearing the air. Like, I'd like to bring up something that's been on my mind that needs clearing, and yet I'm afraid that you'll be hurt by what I have to say. So I just needed that preamble to warm myself up. Now, are you available? So again, some of these things require you to have a witness going on so that you can kind of see a bigger frame than just that immediate need that you have. And number 5, my number 5 tip is just the simple, I heard you say, why do I have to have plans? And I imagine you didn't like the way I asked my question. Is that the case? And just that good enough. You can just naming something and inviting them in. You don't just say, I notice and I imagine. You ask, is that true for you? Two-way communication is generally more relational. And so when you can bring things to a back and forth rather than just you dumping something out, it usually works a lot better. Okay, and we are at 11:02, so it's about time to close. And I want to just thank you all for your participation and your attention today. I do these once a month. Also, I've got a workshop coming up that has room in it, January 25th. I've got a 6-session Zoom webinar. Darcy and Doug have been on this before. Kathy's probably been on it with me. Have you? I think Kathy's been on one of my 6-session Zoom. It's the Getting Real, the basic Getting Real workshop, based on the book Getting Real and the book From Trigger to Tranquil. And that's where we get to practice this stuff. In a Zoom session. It's not in person. I have an in-person workshop May 11th and 12th too at my house here. So you're invited to look back at the newsletter or contact me if you're interested in those. Okay, thanks for coming. Bye.
So much, Susan. We love
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.